Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for our weekly Hanauma Talk seminar series presented by the Hawaii Sea Grant um, Hanauma Bay Education Program. My name is Gavin Y, and I am the Outreach Program Coordinator for the Education Program. First off, I'd like to introduce Fred Rapoon, who is the Education Coordinator for the Heʻeia National Estuarine Research Reserve, or NERR program, and he'll be giving a brief introduction to it, as well as introducing our three speakers for tonight's talk. A few reminders though, before Fred introduces our speakers, please keep all your questions till the end for our short question answer period, or feel free at any time to type it in the chat room and hopefully we can address each one at that time. And as well as turn off your microphone during the presentation, we appreciate it. With that, Fred, would you give a brief orientation about the NERR program as well as introducing our three featured speakers for tonight?
Thanks, Gavin. Hello, everybody. My name is Fred Rapoon, and I'm the Education Coordinator for the Heʻeia National Estuarine Research Reserve, or NERR. And nice to see everybody on tonight. Looks like some familiar faces or familiar names, can't see any faces. So you guys all know, or many of you know this introduction already, so just bear with me for a couple slides. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see that? I'll assume yes. So just wanted to start off how we usually do in our circles when we're in person, gathering for work days, kind of acknowledging the foundation that we all stand on. These three kupuna from the Heʻeia community, Auntie Carolyn Bright, Uncle Jerry Kaluhila, and Auntie Alice Hewitt, were really, it was their vision both of the past and of what Heʻeia still is and could be, that is the reason why the reserve got created and reason why we're all doing the work we're doing today. So just want to mahalo them. The reserve is part of a system that's nationwide, and there are 29 reserves around the country. We are the 29th and youngest reserve. Soon to be not the baby NERR anymore, because there is a new reserve in the process of being established. But right now we're still the youngest, and so we're operated through a cooperative agreement between NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the state of Hawaii through UH. This is for a different talk where people were not from Hawaii, so I had to show this. This is where we are in the world. And this is where we are on the island of Oahu in relation to those landmarks. So we are on Kaneohe Bay, or Kauaho Kamano, and we are in the moku of Ko'olaupoko, and we're in the ahupuaʻa of Heʻeia. And our reserve is in kind of the lower part of the ahupuaʻa, right on the edge of Kaneohe town. It includes wetlands, the coastal area, and Heʻeia fish pond, fringing and patch reefs, and the island of Mokuolo'e, where the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology is. So that's pretty much all I'll say as by way of introduction to the reserve. And tonight we have three awesome speakers who I'm really excited to hear. We have Matt Kahoʻohanohano, who is a graduate student in Botany at UH, right, Matt? Botany, yeah? Okay, good. And we have Melissa Mao, who is a TNC fellow and has been working closely with Kakoiwi in the wetlands. And we have Alishia Orloff, who is a graduate student of Yale School of the Environment. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and we'll just go straight through the other two from there.
Thanks, Fred. Why can't I change slides? Oh, sorry, okay. So aloha kako. My name is Matthew Kahoʻohanohano. I'm originally from Wailuku, Maui, and I am a master's student in the Botany department at Manoa. And for my assistantship, I'm working with the Heʻeia NERR as a graduate assistant. And the title of my project is Characterizing the Ahupuaʻa of Heʻeia during the early 1800s. So this is a map of the ahupuaʻa of Heʻeia. It is north of Kaneohe. It's in the moku of Koʻolaupoko on the island of Oahu. So for my assistantship, I'm working for the NERR, but we're working in support of the local nonprofits that are working in the wetlands of Heʻeia. So we're mostly supporting Kakoiwi, and the goal of my research is to inform decision making for ahupuaʻa restoration. This is a parcel that Kako'o was granted a lease for in 2010 by the Hawaii Community Development Authority, who bought this land from Kamehameha schools in 1991. So a historical ecological approach is desired in the restoration efforts. So a lot of historical information through local community members or aerial photos and historical maps are a lot of the restorations weighed heavily on these things. So this is the oldest known photo of Heʻeia, taken in 1928. The oldest known map was created in 1913, and unfortunately I'm not able to share it because I had to get it released by KS to help inform my research, but I wasn't cleared to share it publicly. So Ikawa Mamua, Ikawa Mahope is in Olelo Noea, which means in the future's in the past, basically. And that's the approach that we take towards restoration in Heʻeia. So the oldest map is in 1913, the oldest pictures in 1928. Kind of an untapped resource that no one really looked into yet were the Mahele documents. The Mahele was in the mid 1800s. Now I'm by no means like a Mahele expert or anything, but I learned that these documents contained a lot of information, people claiming their kuleana and like the land that they're cultivating or living on. So recently, I would say in the last like 5 or 6 years, I think OHA created a website called Kipuka Database, which you can pretty much like a map that you can click on and see like past landowners and those kind of things. So for parcels that were claimed during the Mahele, they have linked documents, all these documents that are scanned. So in one land commission award, there will be a native register, which is a summary of the claimant or the person who is claiming their land. So to the left, there's the native register, which is a summary of what they claim as their kuleana. Then in the middle is a foreign testimony, which is a document, is like a testimony of a neighbor confirming that that is their land. And then on the right is the land commission award, which shows the parcels that they've claimed and kind of tells the lengths of each side and those kind of things. So it's all written in Hawaiian, and it's in cursive, so it's really difficult to read and interpret. But this is where I gathered my data from. So in total, in the Heʻeia wetlands, there were 42 claimants who claimed a total of 102 apana or parcels. So each of these polygons are an apana. So multiple apana fell under a single commission award, and these polygons add up to a total of 65 acres. And the kind of data I gathered from I gathered from these documents were wahipana, or place names, kahuahale, which are dwellings or house foundations, the number of lo'i, as well as different species that were being cultivated. I also want to point out, like, a lot of these polygons are actually, or some of these polygons are outside of Kako'o's lease, but they were connected to claimants who are within Kako'o's lease. So for Wahipana, so on the 1913 map, I'm not able to show there. So through the documents, I found 38 Wahipana, and 20 or 33 of them were not on the map. So this is important in biocultural restoration because names are important, and the names also tell us ecological information. So the ones in yellow were not on the map, and only the ones in white were on the map. So with my data, this is what I was able to construct. So this is a map showing where each parcel, where the claimant, the ili that the claimant claimed their parcels were in. And some of these, so you can see, like, there's clusters like this, like Pahele Law or Kalimu Law, Kawahamano. So that kind of tells you, like, that, you know, because multiple people are saying that this is the ili that they're in, and then when it's projected spatially, you can kind of see that how true that is. But then there's also parcels that have names and are not near the rest of them, and that could be one of two reasons. One is a lack of data, so I ended up grouping them into the rest of the parcels that, because they weren't specifically identified as being in a certain ili. Or also there's such thing as a ili lele, where one part of an ili could be in one part of the ahupuaʻa and another part of the ili could be in another part of the ahupuaʻa. So a second model I was able to construct where everyone lives. So each color represents an individual claimant. So corresponding colors are under a single claimant, and the X's represent where they identified their houses were. And it's interesting because it's like, you know, the colors are all over the place. Like over here, this person has a parcel here, a parcel here, a parcel here, and a parcel here. So that just tells me they have to, you know, live in harmony with their neighbors. So my next maps were based off of these words. I called olelo descriptors, or words that characterize the land. And it's in these words where the nuances are about how they cultivated the land or what kind of specific purposes they were. A bunch of these words could fall, just in English, could fall under fish pond, but like for example, pu'one wasn't like the big fish pond. Pu'one was a mound of land that had water around it, and that mound also had no trees on top, but fish were cultivated around these mounds. So through the documents, I was able to find 14 species. I found tree species, non-tree species, like vegetable crops, livestock, which was pua'a. Also fisheries and identified fish species, which was just ava and pua, which are small fish. So in this map, the blue represents the number of lo'i in a parcel. 10 was the most a parcel had. And so the darker the blue is, the more lo'i they had. And the words are all all the dryland cultivation or species, identified species. I thought it was interesting how over here where most of the people's houses were is also where most of the pigs were. In this section over here, the only two people who identified growing ava were over here on this side, also citrus. And the citrus is interesting because this is the closest to the boat harbor, and at that time, citrus was kind of like a cash crop to sell to people coming off of the boats to prevent scurvy. I also want to point out that all my information are just from people who were awarded their claims. There's also people who didn't get awarded. There's people who didn't even make a claim. So all the non-claim space was awarded to the Konohiki, which is Paki, Pauahi's father. That's how it ended up in Kumenasku's hands. So my second map is where all the fisheries that were identified were. It's also important to know where these lo'i were because it tells us where the water was moving. And something important to the restoration is how we're navigating the water through the landscape and releasing it into the fish pond. So this is a picture of Heʻeia today, and the hope for my research is to help inform ahupuaʻa restoration to strive towards aina momona. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. That was super interesting. I actually haven't seen that presentation before, so I have lots of questions after. I think Alicia is up next. And I think we'll save questions for the end, yeah?
Yeah, Melissa's next.
Oh, Melissa, got it wrong. Sorry. Okay, Melissa.
All right. You able to see that okay?
Yep.
All right. Aloha, everyone. My name is Melissa Mao, and I'm Nature Conservancy Kakoiwi Marine Conservation Fellow. The TNC Kakoiwi Fellowship Program is a 2-year program that provides a wide array of marine conservation experiences in Hawaii. And part of my fellowship has provided me the opportunity to work in the Heʻeia wetlands at Kakoiwi. And so tonight I'll be sharing with you what I've learned and some of the work that I've been doing in the wetlands within the last year and roughly 10 months of my fellowship. But before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge a few individuals. Kavika Winter, the Heʻeia NERR Reserve Manager, Kanikoa Schultz, the Executive Director of Kakoiwi, and Ali'i Minor, the Conservation Director at Kakoiwi. All three of these individuals have taught me so much during my fellowship, and they have taught me and continue to teach me how to work and interact in this space. So I'd like to mahalo them. That's it. So I would like to start off by introducing you to this area and to the organization of Kakoiwi. As mentioned, Kakoiwi is one of the organizations that is part of the Heʻeia NERR. Kakoiwi was founded in 2007 and encompasses roughly 405 acres. If you've ever come to one of our community work days, and as you saw in Matt's presentation, we enjoy showing this 1928 black and white aerial image of the area. You can see here, you can see the fish pond, and you can see an abundant functioning agricultural system. And we like to share this photo because it represents a time of sustainability, clean and flowing water, a productive estuary, and healthy reefs. And it represents what we're working and striving towards here. And so as mentioned, Kakoiwi manages quite a bit of land, but with that comes a lot of opportunity to do great and amazing work. And that's what is being done today at Kakoiwi. There's a lot of great work. We have, you know, the lo'i here that's continually being expanded upon. They harvest the kalo and they sell poi to the community. We have our agroforestry program. We have our gardens and our dryland crops that we sell to the community. And as we speak, we have really a state-of-the-art poi mill being built here. So a lot of great work. But I am going to talk about and focus on the area where I work and where you can usually find me, which is in this area here on the top left area of the wetland here that we call Kealohi, named after Kealohi Point there at the wetland. And you can't really talk about the wetland of Heʻeia without making some mention of the mangroves. Mangroves were introduced in this area in 1922 to hold and stabilize the sediments. And they are known for their many benefits around the world, but here in Hawaii, they are an invasive species. They outcompete with native species. They interrupt the natural flow of streams. And so many of our native aquatic species rely on that makai to mauka connection, and these mangroves break that connection. And so in 2017, Kakoiwi began to remove some of their mangroves. You can see in this forward section here, that's roughly about 6 acres of mangrove that was removed in the initial part of the restoration phase. But you know, you can tell this is an older photo because when you drive on this bridge today, what can you see? You know, you can see straight out into Kaneohe Bay, and you can see straight out to the beautiful Koala Mountains. So a lot of these mangroves have been removed. But what's interesting about this picture is that you get to see what's sitting underneath the mangrove, and you can see this water here, and you can see the natural water channels that are flowing in this area. And that's kind of reflective in many parts of this wetland, even towards the Mauka areas. And so removing the mangrove is really just one step of the many, many, many steps it takes to restore this area into a functioning system. You know, prior to mangroves and during the time before with kalo production and even rice, this was a managed system for many, many, many years. And it managed the way it held, moved, and released water. And it did so in a way that benefited the estuary and it benefited the fish pond. And so the wetland, you know, is a filtration system. It's supposed to be able to hold, move, and release water. But how do you do that in a system like this today? Well, if you've ever gone to a lo'i and you've observed the way water moves into a lo'i, you see that they enter and exit through the different makas, and that they are directed by the kuaunas, the banks. And so that's essentially what we're doing here on the Kealohi side of the wetlands. And I say we, but it's really just a few skilled individuals that work at Kakoiwi who really observe the land and is really tuned into the way the water is moving into this system. And so they're building out these kuaunas. They look like small roads, but they are kuaunas, and they help to move and direct the water to where it needs to go. These kuaunas are made from felled mangrove and along with rock and coral. And these kuauna are multifunctional in that they serve as a bird and resting and nesting areas. And so in fact, last year we had a couple of ai'o nestings here on this specific kuauna. And so you can see on the side of the bank, we had outplanted some native plants here. We also outplanted some on the top of this kuauna to help protect the nesting areas in the future. And what you're looking at here is an aerial image of the area taken not that long ago. You can see here next to the bridge, that was the initial area where the mangrove was taken down. And then you can see the mangrove on the Malka side of that. This mangrove was taken down in this past summer. But what you can also notice is these koana being built out here. And as much as possible, we try to follow and use the existing koana that is in this area, either by physically walking in the wetland and identifying them, where you're consulting the old aerial photos to find them. But you know, this entire wetland system is really part of a larger system, and that larger system being including the fish pond and the estuary and really Kaneohe Bay, because what we do with the water in this area impacts what these guys on the other side of the bridge see. And so what's really interesting about this photo is that, you know, you can see how the water is supposed to travel underneath the bridge, and then you can see the back end of the fish pond wall here. And you can see their sluice gates that they have, their makaha, where you have that exchange of fresh water. And so, for example, say that the fish pond says that they need more fresh water in this area of the fish pond, or maybe they need more water in the opposite end of the fish pond. That's the kind of communication that's happening now between these organizations. And so that so when that happens, we're able to, you know, restore and build out these koanas so that the fish pond is getting the type of water input that they need for their fish pond. And that helps create this cohesive functioning system. And so I'm going to talk a little more. I'm going to talk about the work that I've been specifically working on. So when the mangrove came down, you know, the sad reality of that is how quickly things pop up in its place. And so there were quite a bit of weeds that came up. But with my Nature Conservancy Fellowship, TNC had asked if I would be able to help with some of the first outplantings in the Kealohi wetlands. And we had chosen this area here on the left side, this embankment. And we chose this area because it had easy access, you know, and it was in a relatively controlled area where you could watch how the plants interacted with the space and observe how the plants interacted with one another. And that was really important before we started outplanting, you know, other parts of the wetland. And so a good part, you know, a year or more of my fellowship was really dedicated to this space. And my goal was just to keep weeding out and clearing the area out. I had broken up this area into smaller pieces, so it seemed like I would be able to, you know, get things done. And so when I had cleared off a smaller space, we had introduced, we had brought in 2 wetland plants, this beautiful sedge called kaluha. Wetland birds like the alaiʻula, they enjoy hiding in these higher sedges and nesting in this type of greenery. And we also brought in a beautiful endemic fern. You wouldn't think it was a fern, you'd think it was related to the clover family, but the ihi laukea. And so we weren't sure how these plants would do in a type of system like this, but you know, time had passed, and you can see that some of the plants went into shock, but we remained hopeful. And so I was just continually clearing out this area and trying to just keep pushing back and pushing back. And so as I'm clearing this area, I'm becoming better at identifying plants, and not just the ones that I don't want, but some native ones that are emerging on their own. And not just in this area, but in other parts of the wetland as well. You know, you clear an area and provide that opportunity, you know, you'll be surprised, I guess, what's been waiting and sitting underneath the soil. And so one of the first plants that had emerged on its own after the wetland, after the mangrove came down, was this beautiful pinkish purple native hibiscus called hauhelewai, or also known as okiohala. That was one of the first plants that we had noticed came up. there were a few of them that were in the wetland. And so I had gone into the wetland, gathered some of its seeds, took it home, propagated it at my house, and outplanted that into the wetland. But then we also noticed there was an abundance of neke, you know, you just had to know where to look. Kipuka came up, hala, ve'oveo, ilima, uhaloa, noni, ahuava, akulikuli, and tea. I mean, these were all plants that just emerged on its own. And I think it's really important, in my experience, being able to identify these plants at a young age, because they kind of look like any other plant. But these plants have made a significant impact to our restoration, because they've provided so much of the stock that we're using today and so many of these seeds. And so as these plants had matured, I would gather the seeds and outplant them in that area that I was trying to restore, or we would physically move the plant if it was in harm of being trampled or run over. And so we would move them to that restored area. So after time, you know, and just continue maintenance and outplanting, this today is what that area looks like. There's about 17 different native plants here, from, you know, ground covers and different types of sedges. We have that beautiful ilima here growing that came up on its own, the hauhelewai, the hibiscus. We have ferns, and we have these milo trees growing here. You can't see it, but a couple of nonis came up, you know, all on its own, just being able to provide its space to do so. And so this area has become like a living nursery for us. And we've been able to use a lot of the seeds and plants from this area to outplant in other parts of the wetland. This, I mentioned that Milo tree in the prior slide, and this is the Milo tree, but on the other end of that restored outplanted area. But this is a before and after picture, not exactly, but pretty close to one another. You can see on the left-hand side, this was one of our first community work days. And I mean, what a difference. On this day, they cleared that entire area behind them. And one of the reasons why this area looks the way it does is because of the support from the community. But you can see not only the before and after of this outplanting area, but you can notice these massive mangrove trees in the background. And, you know, as unique as these trees are, when they were removed, you could actually really hear the land breathe again. And you could hear that and feel that. And, you know, look at those mountains. That view is priceless. Anyhow, that's just some of the work that I've been doing, and at Heʻeia, Kakoiwi. And I thank you for your time and for providing a space to share. I'd like to thank the Nature Conservancy, NOAA Office for Coastal Management, the Heʻeia NERR, and of course, Kakoiwi. Mahalo.
Wow. Thank you, Melissa. That was really awesome. I love the images, and it's kind of neat to think about how Matt's talk connects to yours, and that, you know, maybe some of the plants that you saw popping up were taken care of by people who actually lived there in the past and created that seed bank. Okay, so next up we have Alicia. If you want to share your screen.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alishia Orloff, and I am a student at the School of Forestry at Yale University. And I just wanted to say that I have a lot of gratitude for this opportunity to be part of such an amazing project that you guys have been hearing about. And I have so much gratitude for my advisors, Kealoha Friedenberg, Shimi Ree, Kavika Winter, and Kanekoa Schultz, for their patience through this learning process for me, and all their guidance too. So I started working at the Heʻeia National Estuarine Research Reserve with Kakoiwi, and this work is really special because it integrates a combination of different management practices, and it brings people together to restore lands and create resilient ecosystems. And I love the fact that it's important at this place that through this work, people are prioritized and they're central in maintaining healthy ecosystems, because these are socio-ecological systems, and when we restore biological and cultural integrity of Heʻeia, we can build an abundant legacy for future generations. So I'm going to throw up another map for you all. Apologize for the graphics, but again, 1928. And looking back in time, we can see the richness of this landscape, the richness that it once held, and how to restore it and move forward. So 2018, we begin to see this restoration happening up at the top in the Kealohi area where Melissa was previously presenting on, and the mangrove being cleared and the waterways slowly opening. And today we see a framework for what the future of sustainable land management can look like. So the restoration model that the reserve follows is one of Indigenous resource management, one that has maintained ecosystem health for centuries. And this is because all these dimensions that you see a part of the ecosystem are seen and valued equally. Ecosystem services describe the ecosystem health and their processes that sustain life. And so just briefly going over them, supporting services are ones that really provide a foundation for all the other ones. They include soil formation, nutrient cycling, and biodiversity. The regulating services kind of maintain balance between these processes. They include things such as flood control, climate regulation, water quality. Provisioning services are tangible goods, like traditional and diversified crop production and medicine, and cultural being one of great significance here. Some of the less tangible services that we get, such as recreation, relations, ohana, and stories. And something that I wanted to extend to you all, I was curious just to see maybe something that you all identify with, or one of these services that you particularly value the most. And so if you guys are comfortable opening up the chat function and maybe providing one word to come and comment on which services that you value the most. So I'll give you a couple minutes for that. Some of the supporting and regulating services are definitely maybe a little harder to see, but they have really big impacts too. Yeah, it is definitely hard to pick one. I definitely challenged you guys with this. But thank you. Yeah, actually mentioning water quality. So kind of segueing into water quality, actually, these are, when we think about ecosystem services, our health is dependent on the health of these ecosystem services. But also, like Shimi mentioned at the last seminar series, the health of the environment is also dependent on us and the work that we're doing in these restoration sites. And these are inextricable linkages between us and the environment that require relationships of reciprocity. And this Hawaiians know best, and it's something that I'm learning. And so if we use water quality as an example, it impacts us just as much as we impact it through restoration work. And this is something that I've been helping out on the reserve to measure. So this is a diagram of the Kealohi site that Melissa Mao was working on, and the brown sections, of course, are bridges, and the green areas, the green boxes, are areas that we have been working actively to outplant native species. And I have various different water quality monitors along this channel to see how it's changing as we're restoring vegetation along this channel. And this box, green box at the end, that is particularly one site where the uncles and all the other managers at the site have been working to open the waterway. And so here are the images. This is right before I started water quality. You can see it's kind of starting to open up. This is looking out towards the fish pond. And this is a clearing of 5 feet on each side. And this was midway through my water quality measurements. And so just kind of thinking about the numbers and things that I saw, specific changes in temperature. So I saw that closer to the restored area, it definitely got a lot colder, even though the site further back stayed the same. And of course, there's variations in weather and whatnot. And so it was just really interesting to see this change. The average temperature was a lot colder downstream. Also, oxygen increased throughout this time, and getting closer to the restoration site. And it was important also for the uncles that I also looked at salinity and the different salts that were in the area. And that, of course, is another biological indicator, like all these other ones, that kind of guide what kind of biological activity, what processes are going on. And so it's really important to know when the uncles are managing these ecosystems. And it's important also to know that this kind of sets the stage for the survival of invasives or native species. And on the other side, I was also measuring water quality in the lo'i. And so these green boxes are 4 that had open water where I could measure water quality. And so here are some of the sites that I was measuring. And here's an image of more of a fallow lo'i that was flooded. And then this is a planted lo'i, which in the back of that image, that second image, you can kind of see the vegetation can get pretty dense in there. And so something I noticed was these 2 sites that just flashed. So those look more like the right image, whereas these 2 sites look more like the left image. And based on that, you can kind of notice patterns of like the open water has greater temperature because of more solar radiation, and it has, surprisingly, it had more oxygen, which I was not expecting, because usually in like colder temperatures and whatnot, you think that colder temperatures can hold more oxygen, but that wasn't the case in these. And so using this information I'm hopefully allowing these uncles to make management decisions on how to move forward. And this is really important because through the lens of traditional Hawaiian management, we can start to understand the conditions that are optimal for sensitive species. And so this is especially true for the alaiʻula in the top left in this image, the Io, and right below that, and the Koloa. And these are 3 species that have are sensitive to these changes in land conversion, and especially in the wake of sea level rise. And so we're really concerned about how these conditions can be cultivated to be optimal for these species. And so to better understand this relationship of management and ecosystem health, a graduate student, Erin Opie, and I have been collecting data on different plant communities and how these species of native birds are utilizing these spaces. I'm specifically measuring plant communities, plant characteristics of cover and density, to see the structure of the habitat and how that's important. And so these are, this is the site that I've been working in, and all the individual points are areas that I have worked tirelessly to get out to. And so in the managed lo'i, this is what the sites look like. Managed wetland, I had the opportunity of going back into the recently cut mangrove to see those beautiful open waterways. And in the back, there are still some open ponding areas that were really beautiful to wade in and swim in. So to get to some of the sites, which was really fun. So while I don't necessarily have specific data to show you about the plant measurements that I've taken, this is a summary of the surveys of water birds I've been doing. So seeing how the conditions of water quality and habitat, plant structure can influence the birds that were these patterns of birds on the site. And so this is a lot, but the size of the circle represents the average number of birds that I was seeing over all my surveys. And so areas with dark circles had, on average, a lot of birds that I saw. And then the color represents, oh, did I mention dark circles? Okay, so large circles meaning there's a lot of birds, and then dark circles meaning I saw them a lot. So every single time I went out there, they would consistently be there. And so this is really important to think about what kind of habitat we're shaping and how we're making these areas conducive for native birds. So something that I wanted to mention is that while we're all connected to, I'm learning about the connections of these sociobiological systems, it's really important through this process that I'm beginning to learn about co-management, that it is important to have reciprocal relationships with individuals that are doing this work, because a lot of scientists, right, are obsessed with not being a part of the change, and therefore we sometimes become detached from understanding it. And I've been learning, and I've been guided to realize that it really is important, and it's one of the best ways to understand these systems is to be in the work and to be actively a part of the change. And so that's something that I have been really fortunate to be a part of, because the uncles are the ones who are making this change happen, and they should be prioritized just as much as the water birds and anything else that's being measured. Because everything here has Pilina connection, the land, the people, the stories. So mahalo for everybody who works here. And we're so fortunate to have such a strong community dedicated to making this land what it once was, abundant. And I will pass it over now back to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. That was really awesome. You've gotten to participate in and create such a wide snapshot of all the different activities happening at the reserve. And it's really cool to see all the data that you've collected. And I just want to give you a special shout out because Alicia is leaving to go back to New Haven in about an hour. She's going to go to the airport. It's been really great having you around, and you know, all these mysterious uncles who you keep mentioning. They speak highly of you. They've been really glad to have your help, and you've just been willing to jump in and help with anything that was needed. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, and we're gonna have some time for questions. So if anybody wants, they can type into the chat or just come off of mute. And let's see what kind of questions you guys have.
If you guys have any questions, please feel free to answer or type it in the chat and we can address it. About 10 minutes, so 7:30, so we can end sharply. So Alicia can go fly off. I got a question for Melissa. So the area you cleared, did that, it kind of, I guess it relates to Alicia's kind of surveys to relating to birds. Did that affect like some of the populations? I know like some birds like kind of densely populated areas, but when you cleared it, did you find, I guess, a change in the, you know, different types of birds? Or I'm not a bird expert, but.
Yeah. For the question, there were some nestings of Laula in that area, and they have a favorite spot in a specific area of that restored area. But you know, so much of it is connected. That Koana that I showed you is right next to where I'm restoring. And they like to swim right back and forth across this river, and that Koana, we're creating this habitat. And so I think it's that Koana, it's the open water, it's the restoration of plants that contributes to that all. It's all connected. I don't think I would be able to bring back any birds if there was not any water, and likewise, vice versa.
Yeah. Just wondering about change in space. Anybody else got any questions? And speakers, if you feel free to put your contact info, so in case everybody, anybody wants to ask you any specific questions, feel free to shoot your email, whatnot.
I have a question for Alicia. I'm wondering how you took your bird data.
Yeah, so there were Erin Opie, the individual that I've been collaborating with to kind of develop these methods. So she was also taking point counts around the reserve, and so I kind of used that framework to go into my project. And so I was basically just standing at a point. Each one of those spots that you saw on the map, I was standing there and observing birds for 10 minutes. And I was looking in a radius of like 15 meters. It's really hard to see birds in the back, and so I kept that radius pretty small just to make sure that I could capture
Thank you.
We have a few more minutes. Anybody else got any questions?
Yeah, Matthew, are you reading all of that, those documents and translating everything, or are you just looking for keywords as you go through those Mahele documents? Like, how does your process work?
Well, yeah, I'm just reading them and finding keywords. Does that make sense? It's very simple. I mean, they're not writing in complete sentences. So, you know, a lot of them are keywords. Like it'll just say like amala, or like it'll just be like a lot of one-worded kind of things. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I had another question actually. So you said that like some of the land, or a good chunk of the land, was actually claimed or was not claimed, and so Abner Paki, as the Konohiki of the area, kind of claimed it. Do you think that there were families there? Like, are you seeing references to other
Oh
families
yeah,
that didn't make claims?
for sure. Because so on the foreign testimony, the neighbor is describing the four sides of the person claiming it. So sometimes one side might say like, oh, this person's Aina Kalo or this person's Hale, but then that person doesn't even show up in the claims.
Do you think it's enough to be able to eventually include that data? Or
Yeah,
is it okay, cool,
I think so. I thought about that too.
awesome.
There's a question from Alicia.
I guess I was just wondering like what the interview process was. Was it an interview process, and like how did that go?
No. So I didn't interview anyone. I was just reading documents. These documents are from the mid and early 1800s, but they're all available online. So yeah, anyone could go through the process I went through using Kipuka Database.
I think these people came before some sort of land board, right? And they were testifying. Like they may not have written it down themselves, right? It may have been an in-person thing that they.
Yeah, so that's another thing too to keep in mind is like it is someone telling someone else that, and then that person who works at the land commission is writing it down. So even in that process, you know, I'm sure like information was lost. There's also even in the documents though, like a major player in Heʻeia during that time was a guy named Uhu, and he was actually kind of like the acting Konohiki because Paki wasn't there. You know, he was the guy who was like actually there, and he claimed 10 apana, and on that map he only had one. So that's why on his apana there's like a bunch of words because I attached it to that one parcel. But he actually claimed 10, which was the most anyone claimed down there. But they're like they didn't translate, so a lot of things are lost through like each little process.
Anybody else got any questions? I think someone was trying to talk.
Yeah, that was me. But
Oh.
if we're running out of time, I can talk to Matt for like forever and ask him all these questions later.
Yeah, we can try to wrap it up. It's 7:30, so
Yeah.
I want you guys to. Once again, mahalo for you guys for taking your time out, presenting at our seminar series, and have a safe flight, Alicia. Thank you guys for co-hosting this month, and hope everybody can make it for next week. Next month's theme will be focusing on the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument, focusing on Olelo, Hawaii, and nomenclature type of things. So hope you guys can tune in for that. With that, hope you guys all have a great night, and aloha and mahalo.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.